G'day everybody and welcome back to a brand new video here on the YouTube channel. And yes, the Brisbane Lions have won the 2024 AFL Premiership, and today I'll be telling you the story on how they've done that, because trust me, it's a good one. To start off the story, I'm taking you to the 30th of September 2023, aka the 2023 AFL Grand Final. For those who don't remember, it was a grand final between the Collingwood Magpies and the Brisbane Lions. Late in the fourth quarter, Charlie Cameron kicked a goal to put the Brisbane Lions in front and hoped it was enough to win the game. But not long after, Jordan De Goey received a handball from Nick Dacos, which led to him slotting a goal from 50 metres out, putting them back in front. As the final siren sounded, the Collingwood Magpies were the 2023 AFL Premiers and the Brisbane Lions were sent home heartbroken. 2024 was a fresh start for the Brisbane Lions, as it was for all teams. During the trade period, they picked up Tom Doedee, who recently played for the Adelaide Crows in previous years. Not only that, but during the draft, they picked up Logan Morris at pick 31, who they hoped would be playing a great key forward role. They started off the year by taking on the Gold Coast Suns in this year's preseason matches. They went on to win that game, with the final scores being 56-73, and the very next week, in week 2 of preseason, they defeated the Sydney Swans, with the final scores being 56-81, and they headed into the AFL season with plenty of confidence. To kick off the AFL season, it was announced that the Brisbane Lions would take on the Carlton Blues at the Gabba. This took place during the events of opening round, with the exact date being Friday the 8th of March. With just over 1 minute to go in the fourth quarter, the Lions had the lead by 5 points. That wasn't until Harry Mackay kicked his third goal of the day to win the game for Carlton by 1 point. The Lions' problem throughout the game was their inaccuracy, with them kicking 12 goals 13, and both Charlie Cameron and Lincoln McCarthy kicked 2 goals 3. And it was then announced that Kadeen Coleman was injured and was unlikely to return for the rest of the year. 1 week later, they flew down to Perth to take on the Fremantle Dockers at Optus Stadium. Joe Danaher and Eric Hipwood both had outstanding performances, with them kicking 3 goals each. But unfortunately, that just wasn't enough, as Fremantle won the game by 23 points, with Caleb Sarong racking up 46 disposals. As the Lions had started the season 0-2, they were lucky enough to receive a bye during the round 2 clash and hoped to come back as a better team. In round 3, it was the grand final rematch, Collingwood v Brisbane, this time at the Gabba. At this point in time, neither of these teams had won a single game all season. But all their hard work and preparation during the bye just wasn't enough, and the Pies ran away with a 20-point win. This meant that the Lions had started the season 0-3, and it wasn't looking like their season was going far. Although both Dane Zorko and Lachie Neale did rack up 30 plus touches each in the clash against Collingwood. Round 4 was a massive game, which was against North Melbourne, meaning if they lost this game, it probably decided where their season will go. But when looking at the stats for the game, there was zero chance they were going to go on to lose the game. Post-game, Joe Danaher had kicked 5 goals and Hugh McCluggage had racked up 36 disposals. And no surprise, the Lions won their first game of the season, with the final margin being 70 points, which moved them up to 13th on the ladder. Round 5 took place at the MCG, where they faced off against the Melbourne Demons. This was the first time the Brisbane Lions had played at the MCG since the 2023 AFL Grand Final, and let's just say the Lions didn't really have high expectations when playing at the G. The Lions shocked not only themselves but also everyone when they bet the Melbourne Demons by 22 points, which at the time the Demons were at second on the ladder, but by the end of the round they dropped down to 5th and Brisbane rose to 10th. Round 6 seemed like a game that the Lions could potentially win, with them taking on the Cats at the Gabba. And no surprise that at quarter time the Lions had a 4-point lead against the Cats. But as the Cats took the lead at half time, things only continued to get worse for them, as the Cats won the game by 26 points. But the Lions had only themselves to blame, with them kicking 13 behinds with only 4 goals. After a very poor start to the season, they didn't go into round 7 with high expectations, as they would be versing GWS at Manuka Oval, which ended up being a walk in the park for the GWS Giants and what they would call free premiership points. And as the final siren sounded, the scores were 113-59 and the Giants won the game by 54 points. Round 8 was a massive clash between the two Queensland sides, being the Brisbane Lions and the Gold Coast Suns, which took place at the Gabba. This also happened to be Logan Morris's debut game, where he was caught Eddie McDonald's before the game. The Lions were lucky enough to get another win to their name after beating the Suns by 34 points. This game also gave Dane Zorko the opportunity to rack up 34 disposals, and close behind him was Lachie Neale, who racked up 34. But unfortunately, Lincoln McCarthy injured his ACL and missed the remainder of the AFL season. On Sunday the 12th of May, after the Lions had flown down to Adelaide, they took on the Adelaide Crows at the famous Adelaide Oval. It seems to be an absolute thriller throughout the entire game, one that would come down to the final wire. The Lions looked like they would go on to win this game until Jordan Dawson received the ball, but after heading for goals only scored a behind, with the scores being 90-90, and those remained at the final scores, and a draw occurred, giving both teams 2 premiership points each. The Lions didn't know how to feel fresh off a draw, but when seeing they were taking on the Tigers at the Gabba the very next week, they were hoping to redeem themselves. And that's exactly what they did after winning the game by a massive margin of 119 points. with both Kai Lohman and Charlie Cameron kicking 5 goals each. Round 11 was slightly concerning for the Lions as they would be taking on the Hawks at Marvel Stadium. Although the Hawks weren't necessarily a good side at that point in time, they had won 2 out of their last 3 games and only lost against Port Adelaide by 1 point. But the Lions struggled to get up yet again and lost the game by 25 points. Round 12 was the Lions' second bye of the year, and as they sat on 13th of the ladder, they were hoping to come back as a stronger team. And if they didn't change anything soon, that could be the end of their season. Their first game back took place during round 13 against the Western Bulldogs at Marvel Stadium. And unfortunately the Dogs just couldn't put up enough of a fight and the Lions won the game by 43 points. Not only that, but Eric Hipwood scored 6 goals with Lachie Neale racking up 38 disposals. The Lions seemed to be on a winning streak after they bet the Saints by 20 points the very next week. And in round 15 they bet Port Adelaide by 79 points. Not to mention that Eric Hipwood kicked 5 goals during that game and Lachie Neale racked up 37 disposals. And due to Logan Morris's 2-goal performance, he received a Rising Star nomination. And the 3-game winning streak soon turned into 4 after defeating the Melbourne Demons at the Gabba in a 5-point thriller. Round 17 was a game against the Adelaide Crows, and we all know what happened the last time these two teams faced off. That's right, it ended in a draw and they didn't know how this game would go. But the home ground advantage was all they needed, and that 4-game winning streak soon turned into 5 and won the game by 11 points. This game ended in Brisbane Lions rising up to 7th on the ladder, meaning they just needed to maintain that spot to make this year's finals. Round 18 was expected to be a walk in the park as they were taking on the West Coast Eagles, but surprisingly they only won the game by a margin of 13 points. And their next game was one that the Lions weren't ready for, as they would be facing off against the Sydney Swans, who had been the best side in the league all year. But Joe Danaher and Hugh McCluggard kicked 3 goals each, with Dane Zorko racking up 29 disposals, and that was all they needed, and they won the game by 2 points. After Callum Archie kicked the winning goal with just under 3 minutes to spare. During the round 20 clash, the Brisbane Lions took on the Gold Coast Suns at People's First Stadium, and most teams had struggled to beat the Suns at People's First all year. But the Lions didn't even struggle slightly, with them winning the game by a 28-point margin. After this game, they officially sat at second on the ladder with a slight chance of them finishing first. The next week was against St Kilda at Marvel Stadium. And as the Lions sat in the top 4 and St Kilda were just outside the bottom 4, the Lions had 0 things to worry about. And after winning the game by 85 points, they were only 1 win away from having a 10-game winning streak. Considering their season was nearly over during the round 12 bye, it's quite impressive that they were finding themselves in the top 4. But all good things must come to an end as GWS Giants bet the Brisbane Lions during the round 22 clash at the Gabba, with best on ground being Will Ashcroft with 29 disposals. The very next week was the real grand final rematch where they took on the Collingwood Magpies at the MCG. Things looked very good for them at quarter time, with the scores being 16-40 as the Lions led by 24 points. With just under 7 minutes to go in the final quarter, Joe Danaher was given a set shot to possibly steal the game but only scored a behind. It then ended in the Pies moving the ball up forward, where a goal was scored by Lachie Schultz. And just minutes later, Schultz had done it again, which brought the margin to 5 points with just 3 minutes and 9 seconds to go on the clock. And as a stoppage occurred inside Collingwood's 50, Bo McCrory headed for goals and won the game by 1 point. But despite the loss, Joe Danaher had an outstanding performance with him kicking 4 goals. And the Lions won their final game of the year against Essendon by 20 points at the Gabba. The Lions finished off the AFL season in 5th spot, meaning that if they wanted to go all the way this season, they had to do it the hard way. Week 1 of the finals, they took on Carlton in an elimination final, meaning if they won the game, they progressed onto a semi-final, and if they lost the game, their season would come to an end. And after nearly leaving Carlton scoreless in the first half, they went on to win the game by 28 points. In the semi-finals, they faced off against GWS at NG Stadium. Halfway through the third quarter, the Brisbane Lions would find themselves 44 points down, and the Giants had just accepted the fact that they had won the game and moved on to a prelim final, as most teams would. But the Lions refused to give up. And after a massive comeback, the Lions won the game by 5 points, with the final scores being 100-105, with Joe Danaher kicking the winning goal. This meant that the Lions would face off against the Cats in a preliminary final at the MCG to decide who would take on the Sydney Swans in the AFL Grand Final. The Lions led at quarter time, but the Cats led at half time. At 3/4 time, the Lions had a 2-point lead, and it was still anyone's game going into the final quarter. With under 3 minutes to go, Ollie Henry kicked a goal to put the Cats up by a margin of 1 point, but after winning a quick clearance, Archie received the ball inside 50 and the Lions took the lead straight back. As the final siren went, the Lions won the game by 10 points and moved on to the AFL Grand Final. Due to a dislocated shoulder, the Lions had a massive out, being Oscar McInerney, who some would argue was one of the best ruckmans in the comp all season. They were forced to bring Darcy Fort in, who had been dominating in the VFL all year. At quarter time of the grand final, the Lions had an 8-point lead, and let's just say the margin only continued to get larger from there. And the final scores were 60-120, and the Brisbane Lions were the 2024 AFL Premiers, and Will Ashcroft was announced as the youngest player to ever win a Norm Smith medal. And this video does have to come to an end now, but if you guys did enjoy, could you show me that by liking the video, subscribing to the channel if you're new, and of course hitting that notification bell so you can be notified when new videos are coming out, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.